There we go. Your microphone should be on. Toby, just say hello so we can hear you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. Oh, there we go. You brushed your hair as well today.
had a quick trim this morning. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good, mate. Glad you made an effort. Okay, so we're going to get into the webinar now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Seems to be a bit of confusion with some people. So maybe it wasn't clear enough that we're starting on Queensland time. So apologies for that. So hopefully everyone got the, well, everyone that's in here obviously got the passcode that was emailed through in the last hour or so. So hopefully people are finding that. I know there's a few questions come through, so a bit of a learning point, I guess, to make that clearer a bit earlier. So yeah, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about learner experience, particularly a few kind of top trends. And joining me with that discussion is a director from Learning Vault, Toby Jones. So we'll get onto that in a second and say hello. Before we get into it, question that always gets asked as we go through, and there's no need to ask, but I'm sure some people will. Content is going to be shared after the webinar, so we'll send through a video or a link to a video so that you can review afterwards, or if you have to scoot early or what have you, you can review in your own time. Please keep audio switched off or muted. So it does get a bit confusing when there's audio firing around all over the place. So still no sound. You can hear me, hey Toby?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, so hopefully that's just one person there. So please use chat to take part in the discussion, and we're very keen to get people involved. So if you've got comments or questions as we go, we'll try and pick them up as we go. Not always, there's no accreditation to this webinar, so we don't issue statements of attendance, but so unfortunately, sorry to disappoint there. Yeah, so please contribute and get involved in chat, and we'll try and pick it up as we go along. It's not always as easy as you'd hope, but hopefully with us two watching that, we might pick things up, Toby. And yeah, please get involved as we go, and we'll see how we go. Just to introduce myself, I'm the founder and managing director of Cloud Assess, a company called Cloud Assess. We're an online training and assessment solution just for RTOs, built exclusively for the vet sector. We started or came about because we were in RTO and identified that we had a problem with how we were going to be more effective doing assessments, and created our own solution. And that business, I sold that business, and then we kind of focused on the Cloud Assess piece, which has been the past 8 years, which has been good. You will see a link to the website there, so there's more information available if you want to dig in and get more information. Very pleased, as I say, to have Toby Jones joining us today. So Toby is one of our, Toby's the commercial director for Learning Vault, and again, there's the website address there. So we've got a business relationship with Learning Vault where they're a partner on our marketplace, and we sell their resources, and we get a lot of very positive feedback about their resources and what they do and how they support the industry with some really good stuff. And then Toby's also, or the team at Learning Vault, have been doing some really interesting work recently on Microcredentials, which we're going to talk about in a wee while. So have you got anything more to add, Toby? You're a bit of you've got a bit of a tech background.
Yes, I suppose it's a similar journey, really, Learning Vault. We actually used to be an RTO ourselves back in the day, and then we actually transitioned into purely content. And I suppose we're a team of teachers. So both my parents were teachers. I taught for a little while in the UK as well. So we're a kind of collective of education pedigree, I suppose. Yeah, and as Rob mentioned, we're very pleased to partner with Cloud Assess to offer our learning content via the Cloud Assess marketplace. So we have content in hospitality, cookery, and business. And as you know, business is going through the wonderful training package update at the moment. So we're busily working away to bring that to market. And then as Rob mentioned, we've more recently been really sort of specializing in sort of building out custom content, and with that micro-credentials, and then also the mega trend that is digital badging, and I'm very pleased to be the first digital badging agency in Australia. So that's something we'll touch upon a little bit later on.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, pretty exciting stuff. So we'll enjoy, or look forward to talking through that. That's good. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
We won't dwell too much on who we are. So what we're going to try and cover today is, we're talking about learner experience and why learner experience is so important, and some of the top trends in that space. So before we get into that, we're really going to try and kind of explore who the learners are, who are these people that we're trying to wow or provide this great experience. So we'll talk about some of the demographics and some of the stats that myself and Toby have dug out from various sources, and make some broad sweeping assumptions and some inferences from that. Then we'll talk about technology. So we'll talk a bit about how technology is evolving and what new technology is out there and what that means. We'll also explore a little bit around kind of options around immersive or experiential technology that people are kind of putting to good use, particularly at this kind of COVID remote learning kind of time. And then we'll talk about assessment design and get some kind of learnings from the experts, so you speak, straight from the horse's mouth, Toby. So I hope you're up to the challenge.
Wait and see.
Yeah, all right, good. All right, so we'll get into a few stats first. Who are the learners that we're talking about? So in some of these stats, you'll see a page that's been taken straight off training.gov as well. So at the moment, apparently there's 4.2 million learners in the vet system, 270 apprentices and trainees, 240,000 in schools, and 27% of that training is funded by the government or people on funded places, which is good, obviously. And apparently, from what I understand, the number of vet learners is scheduled to increase, and there's all sorts of promises being made around extra funding that hopefully will and investments in infrastructure and all these sorts of things with the budget that hopefully is going to bring about some positive change to the industry. Have you got anything to add to that? Or any surprises or take homes from your perspective, Toby?
I think it's always seems to be the case that when there's, sadly, when there are events that go on in the world, when there are, recessions and the like, that education still is comes out strong. So even though I know from speaking to a number of our clients, there has been a bit of a grey area at the moment with, drop-offs in international students, obviously, and also some changing of behaviours with domestic students. But I do think that education will be the go-to for how we actually recover from this. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. And as you mentioned, the funding that will become available to support that into next year. Yeah,
hopefully it's an opportunity rather than a problem for the majority of RTOs. And we are seeing a lot of our clients continue to do well. So hopefully that's a trend that continues. Interesting down here, we see 6.8% of 15 to 64-year-olds of the Australian population participated in government-funded vet. So that's a pretty strong statistic there, which is good. Let's just get that right. Sorry. What do you reckon the ages of the average learner, Toby?
Well, until speaking to you about this, I was going to say about 20. But it's not really the case, is it?
No, and I was surprised as well. So we've just got a chart here. Again, the source is NCVER for this one. And with the micro small text, you probably can't read the categories, so I'll just go through those. So we've got a bar chart showing the size of the population within different age groups. And on the left there, we've got 19 and under, 20 to 29 years old, up to 39 years old in the middle there. And then we've got an increase in population, 30 to 39 years old, and then 40 to 49 and 50 to, what is that? 49 and then 50 to 64 is the last bracket. And then a few that we're not sure how old they are for some reason. And then the blue line there is a cumulative percentage of what those bars represent of the total population. So I was on the same page as you, Toby. There's kind of this perception I had that the majority of learners in the vet system would be kind of under the age of 30, but it's almost 50-50 for under 30 and over 30, which I was quite surprised about. Something else I kind of thought about after we spoke the other day, Toby, was, this is just funded learners. And this represents, you know, with funding probably usually towards a complete qualification rather than, you know, units of competency and maybe fee for service work. I think there might be a kind of disproportionate number of kind of older learners in the kind of fee for service space. But I'm just kind of basing that on best guess, really. I don't know if you've got a different opinion.
I think there's a couple of things really. I think with a lot of changing at the moment with the workspace, I think we are seeing more sort of mature learners coming back to retrain because maybe they want to transition into a different career. But then also with there being funding available for, you know, for example, one of the initiatives, some of the free TAFE courses, it has opened up the opportunity for people to learn who maybe previously were a barrier to entry because of the cost component. I mean, I think I showed with you the other day, I had a friend of mine who's, I think he's about 38 and had been a musician and chef, and that had sort of been his sort of path. And then with the free courses that came up, decided that actually he really wanted to go back and learn a trade. And he's now a budding electrician and is really happy, but previously thought he'd never be able to take that step because of the financial commitment. So I think it has opened up opportunities for people to explore other careers.
Yeah, and that's kind of backed up by some of the NCVER stats. You know, 2.6 million subjects are in students are enrolled in subjects not delivered as part of a nationally recognised programme. So it kind of ties into the theory there, I suppose. But there is a strong connection with people improving or changing their employment status with vocational education, which is what it's all about, I guess, which is great. Next stat then, what do we think the most popular qualifications is? And there's a split here, which this came from an IBIS report on the vocational education industry, which is quite interesting and insightful. Not quite sure where they get the information from because they're probably harvesting it from all sorts of different spaces. But in terms of the AQF levels, there's definitely a peak there for Cert 3. Is that something that you'd kind of agree with or you see in Learning Vault?
Yeah, I would have said our biggest demand for content is in that Cert 3 and then diploma level. I think that sort of seems to be the two quals that people gravitate towards the most. So yeah, I'm not entirely surprised by that, to be honest.
Yeah, likewise. And then the last bit, which is quite interesting and kind of probably relates more to this kind of age breakdown. There's this full-time versus part-time stat that we pulled out from NCVER. And then that really, I think when we discussed it the other day, kind of ties into this perception that maybe it's, you know, more mature learners that are focusing on units or you know, or reskilling or something like that. You know, it's not something that we can completely down tools and finish working, but it's something that we do part-time to kind of personally develop ourselves. Yeah,
I think there's going to be, I think there's a lot more of that as well, and especially with the stats we saw before about the age of learners, and also looking at, I think there was stats around part-time versus full-time. So I think there is a massive increase in part-time learning, be it evenings, weekends, or actually we're seeing a growing trend of people actually moving down to shortening their work hours to actually spend time upskilling.
Yeah, absolutely. Got some more information here, and this was something I ripped off an American website, so it's American data, unfortunately. So we've got to kind of infer that that it's going to be pretty similar in terms of trends over here. But what surprised me on here is, you know, I always assume that millennials would be well in the lead in terms of technology adoption, but you know, that gap is really closing according to this chart. So that represents the percentage of the population of those different generations that have either got a smartphone or a tablet computer or using social media. But the big surprise from my perspective was not just that my generation versus your generation, I guess it is, Toby, are pretty much neck and neck. But the boomers and I suppose the silent generation are beyond kind of the realms of education. But those boomers are really coming on from the generation that they initially couldn't program a video recorder, and now they're getting on board and owning smartphones and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, massively, and the boomers as well have been the recent Facebook stats have been the some of the largest adopters of continued use of Facebook as a connector, whereas we're seeing sort of millennials and Gen Zs and Ys sort of moving towards other platforms. Facebook's really been adopted by boomers and is going very strong in that regard.
Yeah, and it's, oops, just locked my computer. Hope that didn't disappear. Yeah, it's testament to this information on the chart as well. And, I find it quite interesting that, all three generations there, you've got just as likely chance of someone having an iPad, which was quite interesting. Not much separation from the different generations there. So the boomers are definitely catching up and continuing to increase at quite a rapid rate there, especially over the last 10 years. So I thought that was quite good. We did a bit of research as well in terms of our user population as well, and we found some interesting trends. What's your best guess for which is most popular, mobile versus desktop in terms of access?
I don't know, education has always traditionally been sort of more desktop related, so I'd probably be leaning towards that. I don't think we're quite at at people sort of using mobile to the same degree as a laptop, but I'll happily be proved wrong.
No, you're right. It's and it surprised me. Desktop and we can tell the last operating system people use when they're logged in, and yeah, there's definitely a big lean towards traditional desktops or Windows or Macs. Macs are about a third of the population of computer users, but it's still predominantly PCs. What's your best guess for Android versus iPhones?
I'm a massive iPhone user, so I've got a bias. I don't know if I'm more in the Australian market. I think iPhone probably leading the way.
Yeah, iPhone. I was surprised. I thought Android would be more, just because there are a bigger number of providers that supply that tech. But yeah, iPhones are double the number of Android users, so that was quite interesting as well. I was quite surprised.
We're finding that, particularly some of the content that we're building now, there's a lot more demand for students to consume content on mobiles. But when it comes to assessment, we're seeing people actually still wanting to have a traditional way of actually utilizing a full keyboard versus completing it on a smartphone. And so there's sort of almost like a blended tech approach of consuming content on the move on the phone, but then actually when it comes to actually sitting down and doing a knowledge assessment, wanting to actually do it in a more controlled environment.
Yeah, I suppose it's we use phones all the time, every day to kill a bit of time, and wherever you stop for 5 minutes, whether it's waiting for a train or you're out and about, and everyone just is the go-to thing to do to kill a bit of time is just use the phone for a few minutes. So I can imagine the consumption of content, or just like reading the news or browsing through Facebook or whatever. Yeah, it's something you'd do on quite a casual basis.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when you knuckle down and you really want to do some work and focus and concentrate, yeah, I think those and a tablet, yeah, let's face it, it's pretty much a computer, so tablets are probably quite relevant as well still. But yeah, I think the majority of people would want to sit down and work through something on a better interface, I guess, really. So in terms of technology and some of the changes we're seeing there, obviously the user experience and the learner experience is on the forefront, especially for RTOs these days more than ever. The iPhone itself was probably the biggest innovation we've seen for years, and there hasn't really been much that's changed since there. But certainly an observation we've made is that really it's the software that kind of made that touchscreen device useful. And it's something that we kind of take for granted or don't even notice. But the biggest innovations we've seen in terms of technology that allow us to provide those interfaces is really in the kind of web design and the web technology that can kind of facilitate those solutions. There's also a lot of good softwares and programs out there, and I know you guys are fans of, is it Articulate 360, Toby?
We've used that in conjunction with a couple of other products, yeah.
Yeah, but that's a great solution to provide these really nice, engaging features that are all built in HTML. So, you know, your traditional position where apps were the most important way to provide a good, intuitive interface are kind of becoming less and less. I don't know, have you heard of, what they're called now? I've got it written down. This is how well I can remember it. Yeah, progressive web apps. That's a bit of a new thing that's coming on board. You heard of them, Toby?
No, I can't say I have. I mean, I think back to when I was in the UK, I found myself in the sort of education and marketing space. And so we're going back sort of 6 years, and everyone was talking about getting an app for your company. And there was sort of, it became like quite a boom thing of everyone talking about, oh, you know, you've got to have an app for your business. And that was really because websites weren't responsive to the degree that they are now. Whereas because you get so many responsive websites with responsive content, you're finding people are spending more time and effort into the interfaces rather than actually on developing an app, which could cost, you know, tens of thousands. And you could get a responsive website that sits on your phone just as well. So we kind of have a similar sort of take on it really when it comes to our content. So rather than having mobile specific built content, it's more trying to find tools and ways of actually building content so it actually works across multiple devices, sort of straight out the box.
Yeah, and that's certainly something we found. You know, the web interface and the web design capabilities are so strong now that you can make a web-based application, and that's how we kind of facilitate cloud assessment response to the different devices. You know, you're working with one technology rather than Android versus iOS and you know, Windows if you went down that path, which I don't think many do these days. But now these progressive web apps are taking that kind of a step further, and it's actually based on HTML rules, but it's a solution that you can actually, and it's early days for this tech, but it's a solution where you can actually install that onto a computer. So it'd be like installed software, but it would operate like a web app, and it would be able to tap into either your phone sensors through the technology there, or it'd be able to tap into your computer sensors to actually operate in a much more advanced and seamless way. So that's kind of exciting, but I think it's early days before we start seeing a lot of that kind of come to fruition. And there's so many technologies out there that are just making it easier and easier to put this stuff together. It's kind of an exciting time to be in this space. Mm. And then obviously mobile internet and the speed and availability to the internet is forever increasing in terms of where you can get access to data and you know, and how fast that data is. So I think web-based technology is kind of the future, really, much more than we thought maybe 5 or 10 years ago, where apps were very popular, as you say. I'm going to hand over to you and ask a bit about your micro-credentials piece. So I always assumed that micro-credentials were in response to younger generations and their lack of ability to concentrate for a long period of time. But speaking to you, it sounds like a very exciting space, and I'm sure those who haven't really explored it much will be very interested to hear what you've been doing there. So maybe you could share a bit of time with us, Toby, to kind of explain to us what you guys are doing and micro-credentials are all about, I guess.
So there's kind of, I suppose it's worth getting the sort of the terminology, and we've got it noted down as the first point that's worth sort of discussing first, as the term micro-credentials and digital badging have sort of come on the rise at the same time and sometimes get lobbed in together as being the same thing. But I suppose the way that we view it, in the same way that you have say a diploma that you've completed, which is your course, and then you get a certificate as the acknowledgement of that achievement. It's a similar sort of relationship that we believe there is between a micro-credential and a digital badge. So a micro-credential is the course, and a digital badge is the representation of that. So really micro-credentials, we're seeing a number of really interesting use cases. And I think one of the most interesting ones recently has been because of the rise of need for additional training when it comes to COVID. And before the training package actually had an update to release a new infection control unit, you saw industry sort of leading the way. So we worked quite heavily with restaurant and catering, who are one of our partners in the space. And we built a COVID micro-credential, which taught people in the hospitality industry looking to reopen, giving them a COVID-safe plan for how they need to be dealing in the current conditions with use of masks and social distancing and all those sorts of things. And then the sort of the representation or the award for that was the digital badge. And the wonderful thing about the digital badges is the portability of them. The fact that they can, they're essentially a line of a URL that you own. It can be verified so that you know it's definitely you that's been awarded it. You can't just print off another certificate in the workplace and say your staff have earned this particular badge. And so it has a verifiable component, but also the ability to actually utilize it as something to build upon and have it as a permanent record. Whereas we often get certificates over the years for, completing courses, but then also for doing professional development, for attending conferences. And often those certificates kind of just get put into the drawer and then never to surface again. Whereas the nice thing about a digital badge, with it being digital, is the way that we look at it is it's if like taking that paper certificate and sticking a hard drive to it. So you're actually able to investigate further as to what's the person done to achieve this. And then is this something that I might be interested in, and actually encouraging people to have the opportunity to enroll into similar micro courses to then achieve the same sort of badges. So we've started to see really good adoption with RTOs using micro-credentials with a digital badging strategy connected to it to really kind of promote their brand and use it as a bit of a recruitment tool to get students interested at a sort of a low-cost try before you buy type level before maybe committing to a more broader, be it 12, 18-month, 2-year course.
So how does a digital badge compared to a traditional certificate in terms of, could an RTO use digital badging to replace issuing certificates, and how would that be received, do you think? Is that something you've explored?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's sort of where we're heading to at the moment. We actually are going to be releasing a product towards the end of the year that actually bakes into it all of the same requirements for a traditional certificate. So with the correct acknowledgements on there, with the list of units and everything else. But in the short term, yes, we are seeing people utilize digital badges as a like for like of a unit of competency. So you actually get awarded a badge at the end of completing a unit, and you can see in the overall ecosystem where that badge fits in, and so acts as a bit of a motivator for students to continue to try and be awarded more badges. So we have seen it appearing in that kind of way. We also see it in a more of a non-accredited route as well. So if you want to have additional skills brought in to either enhance a student's experience, or in the example that I gave there before about having a bit of a try before you buy, maybe some key skills that a student might want to adopt, and it only takes them a few hours to go through the course versus that extended commitment, which obviously is the goal.
Now, when we were chatting the other day, I kind of threw the question at you: is this kind of devaluing the vet system, issuing micro credentials, and I think you guys have got a good position on that. What's kind of your stance?
So ours is that it has to come from somewhere. So rather than it just being a course for course's sake. So in the COVID scenario, the fact that our micro credentials were endorsed by an industry body, I thought that was important. But the other micro credentials that we build, they all come from a unit of competency. So our goal always is to actually start with the unit of competency. So for example, we've got a series of micro credentials on emotional intelligence. And so it's based around the BSB unit, emotional intelligence. And so what we've actually done is we've broken it down into stage 1, which is 1 micro, which is based on emotional intelligence for self. So for myself, my understanding my own environment. Second is others, so understanding me and where I fit into my work environment. And then the third step is business, so looking for from more of a managerial leader's position and thinking about the emotional intelligence and the sort of things that I need to be maybe putting into place that will affect all of my workforce. So we have those kind of 3 levels, which are the micro courses, and then we actually have an assessment pack. So if the student wants to go on to actually get the unit of competency, they can do the assessment pack to then sort of RPL through that process. So I think for us, it's we're not wanting to go down the route of like the Udemy's of the world, where you know, you can sign up and for, you know, $10 you can learn how to do you know, some Excel skills, which anybody can go and post a course. We think it's really important that we hold on to the credibility, and whether it's created by the RTO or it's endorsed by an industry. I think that's really important. And being able to link it back and map it back to a unit of competency, I think gives that extra layer of endorsement to it.
Yeah, I think that is important. I like the way that you're making sure you get that endorsement from industry. I think that's good, but you know, the reservation or the hesitation I've probably got in the back of my mind is, you know, there's so much rigor around the quality of the vet system and how we drive those outcomes and how important it is. And although that kind of stifles and slows down the industry in a sense, it's also the reason we kind of maintain a bit of integrity. So I think avoiding that Udemy path is important, but hopefully it's a really exciting space. I'm pretty pumped to see where it goes, really.
We're seeing RTOs now partnering up with industry to actually achieve this. So, for example, being able to say, look, if one of our graduates has got your micro credential in, I don't know, some component within how to facilitate a meeting, do you recognize that from an employability standing point? So actually being able to have that added layer. So me as a student, as an earner of one of these credentials and badges, that a recruiter or you know, one of the sort of larger employers in Australia would actually recognise that as a mark of the person's proficiency in it.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. We got asked years ago to look into developing some technology to help RTOs verify statements of attainment or anything. And I think this is a great solution to step towards that without, you know, if you're doing RPL or, you know, you're enrolling a learner and they've got a credit transfer to be applied, you know, it's quite a laborious task to actually get through and verify that with the issuing RTO. So I think it's got a lot of legs and a lot of benefit across the industry. It's just something we have to watch with anticipation, I guess. But
just had a question actually in the chat, Rob, saying, can it be policed? NCVR to manage the badging. So at the moment, with it being a new sort of a new trend, even though it has actually been around for quite a while, we've certainly been keeping our eye on it for a number of years now. There's 2 components regarding it being policed. One is all badges can be verified. So as an RTO issuing a badge, you actually have control over how that badge is used. So we have had some cases, you know, where you can actually revoke a badge because somebody has been representing it incorrectly. You can expire a badge because it's been given in a micro-credential that maybe needs to be updated every 12 or 18 months. I'm thinking about sort of
like first aid or something, yeah.
Yeah, like first aid industries where there's that kind of rigor around it. We also see it quite a lot in the financial sector where people want to have them expired. But there's also a committee that's being formed actually over the next few months who are actually looking at Australia's strategy when it comes to the role that micro-credentials, digital badging, and actually blockchain is actually kind of built into that as well. So there will be more rigor, I imagine, going forward of that. But at the moment, the rigor sits with the RTO as they are the person that actually would issue that badge. Us as an organisation don't actually issue the badges. We enable organisations to issue their own.
Yeah, right. No, it's a pretty cool space and tied in with the the Microcredentials. I think it's a kind of really nice package. But yeah, if anyone wants more information, there's a great page on your website that gives you a bit more lowdown, and I'm sure you'll be keen for people to reach out to you and get in touch, Toby, to kind of explore further. The next bit we're going to talk about is just, so thanks for that, Toby, is just about some kind of experiential or kind of immersive learning options. And quite randomly, we've had a similar outcome on similar projects that we work for different clients based on our conversation the other day. So when me and Toby had a good old yak about what we were going through in this session, you know, we spoke about VR and stuff like that. We'd pretty much done the same thing for different clients. And what that was from my perspective is we had a client that was very excited about the opportunity to create some VR experiences and build that into a kind of very unique and powerful kind of learning experience. And then they did a quick bit of investigation and found very quickly that it was going to cost them a heck of a lot of money to produce one unit of competencies worth of kind of learning experience. So they kind of came to us and asked us what different options were there. Is that about the same for what you went through, Toby?
Yeah, completely. I think, and what came up in our discussion before, and they sort of relates to the, I suppose, what we were just talking about the badging as well. I think with all of these things, when we're talking about new kind of developments in technology, there has to be, for me personally, I think there has to be a really good use case as to why we're doing it. So what's actually the benefit? What's the improvement to the student outcome or the outcome of the RTO, rather than just using technology for technology's sake. And especially if you're going to go down the VR route, you can get some, excuse me, you can get some amazing outcomes and can achieve a lot, but there has to be a really well thought out strategy beforehand. Otherwise it gets very expensive. And at the end of the day, if a student going to do it for real is a better example of it, then sometimes the traditional ways are sometimes the best ways. Yeah,
I think so. And obviously it's probably a bit of a question for people at the moment with the inability to interact the same ways with learners. Maybe not so much now, but certainly down in Victoria where you are, Toby. I'm sure it's still a challenge and a concern. But yeah, we spent a bit of time investigating for this client, and you know, there's kind of a scale of different experiences that you can provide. You know, on the one end, we've got these immersive VR kind of experiences that are very expensive to produce and very difficult to update and change. And then the other end of the scale is stuff that is really accessible that we're already doing, you know, whether it's, you know, PDFs and you know, HTML content that you might get through Articulate or something like that, or you know, even producing videos. Producing videos is very cheap and simple now, you know, video editing softwares. Packages out there are very kind of Mickey Mouse and easy to work with, so it's a lot more accessible than it's ever been. But we kind of had a bit of an explore and a bit of a dig around and kind of looked for opportunities for different solutions. So something we came up with, I'll just pull it up and get a copy of that. Sorry, let's just close that out there. If you give me a second. And we had a quick look at this the other day, didn't we, Toby? But
3D videos.
Yeah. So what we came up with our client was just looked at a range of different media that was available out there, and we embedded it in a HTML package, which is done with Articulate 360. But there's these fantastic 360 images that you can use a 360 degree camera, take a photo and then just cover it in these little interactions, and whether they're, you know, different pictures or bits of information, or, you know, or even, I'm not sure if this one's got one, you can add videos, show maps and all sorts of different interactions. That's a really good way of kind of giving someone access to it could be a workplace, it could be, you know, in a care scenario, they could be in a an aged care facility in a room, looking at for different risks or hazards or different equipment or all sorts of things. And the thing that also stands out is you can use these cheap VR headsets, you know, the kind of modified telephone with a kind of viewer strapped to it, and create these different interactions, I guess. There's a good one here that's actually a 360 video. You can't hear the audio, but there's a 360 video that you can actually have a video based interaction that you can move around, and I'm not quite sure why they made it as a video, because you can't actually see anything moving in this one, but you can hear audio within this forest in New Zealand. But the software to do this is something we found called ThingLink, and there's all sorts of other solutions out there that enable you to produce similar things. But just the way you produce this and put this together was so simple. We kind of identified that it's a very accessible bit of technology that people can really jump on and produce something very powerful very quickly, and very repeatably, without spending an absolute fortune on either technology or a solution that's pretty much impossible to maintain without experts. And I think you came across similar sort of stuff, did you, Toby?
Yeah, we have. We've been looking into it we're doing some work at the moment on microbrewing, and with that there was the brief started off with looking at investing in VR, and then the solution that we actually ended up coming up with, which was a lot more aligned to budgets, was actually to create a 3D video similar to the one that Rob showed there, but with little sort of hotspots which you can click on and then look at the different things within the brew house actually being poured or added to, or the different ingredients, and close-up videos of those. So again, creating a really sort of immersive experience, but doing it at a budget that works for everyone. The nice thing about those as well is that all of those hotspots that you have built in are their own bits of content. So you could actually utilize that video in another part of the learning as well as in that kind of immersive experience that's been created.
Yeah, and we kind of identified you can also create a link to another 3D video and another 3D video, so you can actually kind of create a pathway or a story, if you like, that will take you through in a series of different decisions and different experiences. And I thought that was, it's like the old adventure books where you used to turn to a different page, showing our age now.
Yeah,
you probably had an iPad, Toby, but so yeah, we had books with paper, but yeah, totally different entry cost, totally different production cost, and we thought that was a fantastic solution and really easy to embed it. There's a range of export functions and really easy to embed it in different ways, whether you're providing links to a page and it's hosted for you, or you can embed it into learning content as we kind of showed there. Now, I think it's a really exciting solution, and hopefully that's something people can take away. I'm going to ask you for a bit of wisdom then in terms of assessment design then, Toby. I know we had a great convo. It's probably the third time we've had this conversation, so I'll kind of ask you to take the lead as kind of we always get really good feedback about your content and the stuff that you do and the way that you do it. So it's, and it's always really nicely presented and looks smart and feels good. But what are some of the learning points that have kind of led you to the point when you got kind of such strength and kind of good feedback around what you do and how you do it?
I think having been an RTO first massively helped, and actually prior to exiting the RTO, we did a hell of a lot of research and sort of surveying that we pulled to try and build the best experiences for the learners. And I think one of the things that we really looked at, in the same way that you consume content, we often think, how is a learner consuming content? But then the assessment piece can sometimes just get added on the end. So we really wanted to actually understand how do students actually consume assessment, which was kind of a starting point really for how we then went about building. So one of the things that you'll find within our content is that instead of having one knowledge test, that's supposed to include every single requirement from that particular unit of competency. Instead, that we base it on sort of a rule of about a sweet spot of about 18 to 20 questions. And so if there are, particularly in hospitality, we find that there are particularly voluminous units with number of knowledge components. So we actually break them down into having multiple knowledge assessments. And so the reason really for that was that we were finding that when students were signing in to complete a knowledge assessment and they were presented with at the top that this is, one of 50 questions, we were seeing really high bounce rates where students would, and by bounce rate, I mean, they were going in, looking at it for 20 seconds and bouncing back out again. And then you'd see this spike of people completing their assessments, just before the deadline. Whereas what we found when there was around about 18 to 20 questions, students were actually engaging with it straight away. So we've done that with our content. So if you're looking at any of our sort of learning content in hospitality or business, there'll be sort of 20 slides of information, which we generally build in HTML5 or SCORM as it's sometimes known. And then there'll be 20 knowledge questions based on what you just learned. And then another set of content and another set of knowledge questions. So this idea of sort of learn a bit and test a bit. So making it really consumable. And what we find is that then actually students will work through their knowledge tests in a sort of a more prompt fashion, rather than allowing it to kind of get to the final few days and then trying to cram it in right at the end. Although we can't guarantee that students won't still cram right at the end.
No, I think that's a given. I mean, we had a very similar experience. We had a client that was really struggling to get learners through on the first attempt of their assessment, and it was such a long and technical assessment, and it was so complicated in terms of instructions, and we didn't need a long look at it just to kind of say, look, you need to kind of make this into bite-sized chunks here. It's such a mammoth task to go through all the instructions and actually apply them correctly, that it was more an assessment on someone's ability to read a technical document and apply it than it was actually validating their knowledge around the unit of competency. So I think it's a very valid point.
Yeah, and we do see that. It's it shouldn't be challenging for the students to know what they need to do next. Otherwise they you're not training them on how to navigate to get to the outcome. So really having a clear idea about that user student experience at UX design can be really important as part of that. I suppose the other component which we've got there on the slide is the narrative. And I know it's not a new thing to have a narrative in assessments, but we look at that on a complete scale. So, for example, in the business training package update, we're going through the course at the moment of looking at it on a whole scale as to what the narrative is it's going to run through it all. So if you're coming in as Cert 3 level, you're sort of a frontline member of staff, all the units or the language is tailored to that. If you're coming in at diploma level, you're in more of a kind of managerial department head position within that organization. So the idea is that you follow that common narrative, rather than it being a student progresses onto the next unit and they're set up with a completely different set of circumstances. We've tried to keep there being an alignment to industry, which has really come through our industry consultation, to actually build in those kind of scenarios that would align to what they're actually going to be doing in the workplace.
Yeah, and I think it's just creates that kind of familiar feel as you go through the different bits of content that you've got. It's always in the same context that it's been applied. I think that's quite powerful. You're reading the question then.
Yeah, I was just reading the question.
Yeah, so we've got the question from Training Support. I'm not sure who that is. Have you checked if it can be used for nationally recognised competencies? And I think that's in context to the assessments that you're saying, making them kind of 18 to 20 questions and bite-sized chunks. And Charlie's kind of added these are knowledge checks, not assessments. But I think you are talking about assessments, are you?
Yeah,
Toby?
I'm talking about knowledge assessments. So when I'm talking about 18 to 20 questions, that's just one knowledge assessment within the unit itself. So for example, in some of our hospitality units, you might have 4 or 5 knowledge assessments, but they've all been chunked down into smaller consumable pieces. So rather than looking at it as a singular event, as a knowledge assessment, where you have 50 questions built in there. We've tried to strip them, we've tried to make them into those blocks whereby if a student is on a lunch break, or if they're commuting, or if they're, I don't know, awake at 3 in the morning because they've just finished binging their latest Netflix series, they could actually jump on for 15 to 20 minutes and actually achieve one of those knowledge assessment blocks. But they would have to do all of the knowledge assessments in order to actually complete all the required components in line with that unit of competency.
Yeah, so it's still all maps back, but it's just more consumable, as you say.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. Well, thanks again, Toby. We're going to a little bit off topic. Got another question. Why did you stop being an RTO? I wonder if that's to me or to you. Maybe I'll start first for you. What was the most difficult aspect of being an RTO? Both. Oh, on the spot now, Toby. My RTO was made to we put it together to support the mines, and we'd created our solution and training assessment strategies, and we were working with the mines, and our work with the mines stopped pretty suddenly when the industry went into decline. So as the price of coal dropped, so it would seem, with the value of training, and we stopped engaging with those folks pretty rapidly, unfortunately. So it was kind of a forced hand, but we were so excited and energized about the interest in kind of Cloud Assess and where that was going, that although we carried on the consulting arm of the business and worked in various sectors, we really focused on this new solution, and this is where it got to. What's your perspective on that, Toby? Why did you guys stop being an RTO?
I was just fairly organic as well, to be honest. We had had a number of successes in WA around it's probably similar to yourself, with the sort of different areas with mining. So one of the things that we used to do was actually go around hotels and actually do purpose-built training courses aligned to units of competency for the use case, so using training as a change agent in those hotels in WA. And really during that time, when we were seeing if this was going to be a continuation, we actually started getting sort of interest from our sort of friend RTOs who were saying, hey, we really like your content. Could we maybe purchase the content off you? And thought, well, actually the content is a component that we really enjoy creating, building that learning journey, and really sort of understanding how content can be consumed to achieve an outcome. So we sort of quite organically just transitioned into that through having interest from our sort of friends in the industry. So there was not really a single defining moment that dictated that. It was just more of a transition, and then we sort of did a thing about an 18 month to 2 year teach out, and then moved fully into what Learning Vault is now. Yeah,
and it's we certainly get a lot of positive feedback from our clients, so our mutual clients, that are pretty energized about how you guys put things together. So it's obviously working for you, so that's great. If we've got any more questions out there, we'll pull the session to a head there, and ask anyone, please pipe up if you've got any questions or want to give us a shout around anything. I'm sure everyone's got meetings to get to at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, depending on where you are. So yeah, we'll just thank everyone for the time while we're waiting for any to come through. It's been great talking to you and sharing some of these experiences. So hopefully you've found it interesting. One old fella and someone trapped in the house for the last few months, just rambling on. So hopefully it's been good. You will get a link to the content. You'll also get a survey. So we'd love to get some feedback off those of you who've attended and hopefully enjoyed the session. So that's all right, Martha. Thank you. We'll leave you there, and yeah, if anyone comes up with any questions, we'll hang around for a couple of minutes and see what comes up.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone for attending and the questions that have come through. It's been good, as Rob said, being trapped inside. This is the most amount of people I've so I'm very grateful.
Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? I haven't been keeping an eye on it for the past couple of weeks.
Sunday is the next announcement, but based on our current numbers and the roadmap that was laid out, I don't think anyone's
Holding the breath, hey?
breath at this point, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
It's painful. It's a difficult time, isn't it? So have you, well, you've already been ill with the COVID, haven't you? So
I was an early adopter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh, typical. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Thank you, VB. Yeah, it's a pretty cool space. Yeah. And you got through it all right. So that gives me a bit of hope, I suppose.
Thank yous. Excellent.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to ask us a question, Toby. So I'll hang up, I reckon.
Brilliant. Thank you very
Thanks for
much.